Uncertainty looms over the Nigerian diplomatic landscape, with questions hovering on the delayed appointment of ambassadors and high commissioners to foreign missions. The absence of substantive heads in these crucial positions raises concerns about the implications for Nigeria's international relations. President Bola Tinubu has remained tight-lipped about the reasons behind this prolonged delay, leaving many to speculate and wonder about the underlying causes. Despite multiple inquiries, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has yet to provide a clear response on this. Well, to discuss the importance of timely diplomatic appointment for Nigeria's presence and influence on the global stage, I am joined in the studio by former Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Bulos Lolo, and from our Lagos office later, by Professor F.M. Ubi, who is the Acting Director of Research at the Nigeria Institute of International Affairs. Thank you, Ambassador, to the studio. Very much welcome. I'm glad that you're able to join us.
Thank you very much.
So, talking about missions, it's been your turf for how many years? How many years were you in the Foreign Service before you retired?
I was in the Foreign Service for 35 years as a career diplomat.
Yes.
And in all those years, I witnessed different governments coming into office. And we had different styles in terms of the management of our foreign policy. And of course, in your lead comment, you've talked about concerns being raised over the delay in the appointment of ambassadors.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, so 11 months into office, you know, we might as well now. We still do not have ambassadors or high commissioners in our missions. Is this normal?
Well, whether it is normal or not, let us understand one thing, that it is the prerogative of the president to appoint his principal representatives abroad, who answer either ambassadors or high commissioners. And in essence, either you're an ambassador or whether you're an ambassador or high commissioner, they are of the same rank. And the president decides who to send outside as his representative. But one other thing that we need to understand is there is no law that stipulates when exactly the president should appoint his ambassadors. But yes, 11 months is a bit too long. Most times, after ministerial appointments, the next set of substantive and major appointments made by a new government is that of ambassadors. This time, for whatever reason, the president has not appointed, and indeed, no one yet has gone out in his name as his principal representative. This is the longest in my memory that we have had to wait for ambassadors to be nominated. And after your nomination as an ambassador, you also have to go by law. So
I was coming to that. I mean, if you say this is the longest that you can remember, that's major.
It is major,
That's major. So I would like you to walk us through the process, you know, because there's also a time frame for all of this to happen or to manifest when you're appointed an ambassador. So what goes on?
Depending on where you are to be deployed, we have ambassadors at multilateral missions. And what are these multilateral missions? The foremost of them is the permanent mission to the United Nations in New York. An ambassador appointed today can resume tomorrow because you don't need what we call agreement. An agreement is the consent of the receiving state where you are going to serve, which is the consent in French, you know, translated into English. But if you are going to a country, say like Ghana, Nigeria, after nominating an ambassador, and of course you have to go through clearance by the Senate, assuming you've been cleared by the Senate, you cannot just pack your bags and go into Ghana, Accra, and say you are resuming. The Ghanaian government will have a say, and that is what the agreement is all about. And the shortest time it takes for a bilateral, someone going to a bilateral mission would be a minimum of 6 months, because from the time of your nomination through your clearance in the Senate, getting your agreement and putting together everything, by my experience, and I say this because in 2015, I superintended the Ministry of Foreign Affairs without ministers for 5 months. It was during my time, and in fact, President Buhari, within 3 weeks of his assumption of office, gave a directive that we should recall all the ambassadors. I made a case then to him that it would not be the best. It was better to stagger the recall, allowing some career ambassadors to remain, and then recall the political appointees, because these are the two categories. But when in a fell swoop, you recall everyone.
Yeah, they were all recalled last September.
Which is why that position is empty. I think
Right.
the exception was New York at the time. I don't know whether the man has come back. So by process, if you are going to a bilateral mission, there is a time frame. This administration is already 11 months into office. By the time they name their ambassadors, we are now in April. We are looking at a time frame of either September or October before the first set of ambassadors will be ready to resume at their places of deployment. On resumption, you are new to the work. You are also new to the station. You will need time to settle. And again, this could take anything 6 months and more. So meaning 1.5 years of the administration would have gone.
Yes.
You will have barely 2 years to really function
Yes.
before another recall may come.
So what does this really mean for our interests? I know that the ambassador is accorded more respect than the charge d'affaires in the embassy. So there, maybe investment issues, agreements, or certain things that countries are working on together that has to be overseen by the ambassador. How bad is this for us?
Will I say how bad is it, or how I don't know how to put it, whether it is bad or unfortunate, because in the end we are the losers. Now, an ambassador represents the sovereign of his or her country, and in that case then you are accorded the highest respect. In fact, it goes with some ceremony and protocol. Your first arrival, when you present your letters of credence, you are accorded that symbolic respect of being the sovereign of your country in that in your place of deployment. Therefore, during the presentation, there is this ceremony that is somewhat elaborate that takes place that recognizes you as the representative of your president or head of government. And that is why you call an ambassador out there His Excellency. And your letters of credence state that whatever you say in the name of your sovereign should be believed, because you are sent as the trusted envoy of your sovereign. Now, where Nigeria does not have an ambassador in a country, it means that that level of recognition automatically is missing. Number two, diplomacy is a very rank-conscious profession and practice, where if a meeting is being convened and they say heads of mission, necessarily those who are substantive ambassadors are recognized first. In fact, the pecking order, even amongst ambassadors, counts, which is why you do have the dean of the diplomatic corps. And this dean, depending on where you are, is the longest serving ambassador in that country.
Right, right. Thank you. Just stay with us. I'll come back to you. Our guest in Lagos, Mr. FM Ubi, is here. Can you hear me, Mr. Ubi? Oh, okay. So let's change the conversation a little bit. I would like to ask you, what is the foreign policy thrust of Nigeria today?
Thank you very much for having me. The Foreign Policy Trust of the present government is pivotal in the 4Ds: democracy, development, diaspora, and demography. And what I want to add is that, irrespective of this new foreign policy trust, it, however, has not negated all the other foreign policy trusts we've had over the years, like the African-centered foreign policy of Nigeria, the economic diplomacy, foreign policy, the citizens diplomacy, the attraction of foreign investments, the reconstruction or image building, trust of the other administration. I think all these combine, to give a latitude to the new foreign policy trust of our for our present government, which pivots on those 4Ds I've mentioned.
But when you look at it regionally and continentally, it seems that Nigeria has really taken a beating, and for the so-called superpower of Africa, what are we doing wrong? What is missing for some years now? We are punching below our blood. Can you hear me? Yes.
I would not say we've really taken a beating on our foreign policy options, actions or inactions. We've done a lot. If you look at our engagement, whether within Africa or outside the continent, Nigeria has really done a lot. Now, if we look at it from the African perspective, over the years, we've actually been able to restore peace in many African nations. We've been able to restore democracy in many African nations. It was done under the administration of President Olusegun Obasanjo a few years back. Again, under the last administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, we were able to restore democracy in Gambia, and we played a very critical role in Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, and other places. So I don't think we've taken any business. Right now, if I'm sure you might be taking into consideration the uncanny situation we find in the Sahel and some parts of West Africa, where some nations, are reverting back to military rule. I think the ECOWAS and as well as our president, they're actually playing a very critical role to make sure everything go back to normalcy. Just like you having 5, 6, 7 children, and two of them decide to go away, become prodigal sons. You have to look for a way to bring them back, and I'm sure those the government, Nigeria precisely, is looking into it. And remember, even when the sanctions were being placed, and even when the military took over, we sent emissaries. We sent to those countries, to Niger, to Burkina Faso, to Mali, to talk to the military once there to see how they can revert back to constitutional government. And so I don't think we've been uh, beaten. I think maybe I would prefer you to say our foreign policy has not been really proactive. But I guess that is why under the new administration, if you listen to the president's speech, right from inauguration, he talked about the sustenance and consolidation of democracy. Invariably, there is a lacuna in that sense. And so the president had promised that he will make sure Nigeria is able to spread and consolidate and sustain democracy across West Africa, and the African continent. Furthermore, he talked about economic development. First, it has to be domestically. We have to build our domestic economy. And in his speech, he mentioned regional prosperity. Invariably, our immediate neighbors and the West African sub-region and the continental Africa at large will also benefit from that foreign policy position. And they talk about insecurity. And insecurity is not a one nation fight. It has to be considered for by the international community. We cannot just fight. No country on earth right now can fight terrorism. And so we need the concerted effort of many countries. We need our immediate neighbors to help fight terrorism in the Sahel. We need ECOWAS. We also need the African Union. And I'm glad that, in recent times, a lot of countries are actually playing a whole lot of or giving impetus to many countries that are being terrorized by extremism and all that. And so, please, I would like to say that we've done greatly. Sometimes we need to give credibility to our government. You can't win all and you can't lose all.
Yes.
There's give and take in terms of foreign policy actions or inactions.
Okay, just very, very briefly. It's good that you mentioned that we haven't been proactive. So, I mean, in 11 months, we don't have ambassadors or high commissioners. And, what should be done? I mean, this is serious. Very briefly.
I like to say, when the ambassadors were recalled last year, the president mentioned, that uh, he is determined to ensure a world-class efficiency and quality will, which will henceforth characterize our foreign and domestic service delivery to citizens, residents, and prospective visitors alike. Now, you cannot just appoint ambassadors, whether they are career ambassadors or they are political ambassadors. It has to go through a procedure, a rudimental procedure, for those appointments to be made. And much more importantly, I think, you have to profile these people you're sending. They are representing the president. They are representing the president as well as representing the country, the sovereign. And so you don't just have to pick anybody from anywhere. So that has to go through step by step, like my former permanent secretary mentioned. It's not something that is that easy to do. So I think the president, we are sure he's doing his. They are working or untiring, to create a proper qualitative list, that will be sent out. Right now, in as much as we need the career ambassadors, we need the political ambassadors that the president will appoint or the high commissioners the president will appoint. But we need seasoned ambassadors or high commissioners, as well as, what I would prefer to refer to as technocrats. You see, this is the 21st century, and Nigeria is moving towards being a great economy, among the first 20 economy in the world. And, we need to send seasoned ambassadors, high commissioners, as well as consulars and trade representatives to these countries. And so I think the presidency, it's taking its time to do the right thing, not like it has always been done, in some administration where they don't put the right people at the right place and they don't send the right people to the right stations. I think this time is not business as it used to be.
Yes.
Well, if we have to be a great country. The president has to take its time, even though,
Can you hear
His
me?
Excellency, like my former permanent secretary said, it's getting too long. But I think we
Okay.
shouldn't even hurry the presidency, so that we get the right people at the right places, at the right stations at every particular time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Obi, for joining us. He was speaking there from our studio in Lagos. Thank you, and we'll see you again. So let's finish up here in the studio. He mentioned ECOWAS and the fiasco. And here we are, 3 countries have left.
Right.
They have the Sahel Alliance. What can we do about that? Is it even possible to bring them back to the family?
Bringing them back to the family will depend on a number of factors. But I don't think we should lose sleep right now.
Okay.
Because down the road, these countries will come back on their own.
Why are you so confident of that?
Confident because the Sahel is a region today that poses in fact, myriad challenges. Some are of a short-term measure, others are long-term in nature. And if you look at the capacity of the 3 countries that have left, combined, I'm not looking down on them, but I make bold to say that they cannot carry the weight of the region. And because they cannot carry the weight of the region, numbers will matter. And there are more in ECOWAS than out of ECOWAS. Let's take the example of Mauritania.
Very briefly, please.
So Mauritania left. Feelers are Mauritania wants to come back. So that's my take on it.
Wow, fantastic. Ambassador Bulos Lolo, former permanent secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's been great having this conversation with you. I hope to see you again and have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Constance.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.